Hi, I'm Steve Caseley from CBT Nuggets, and this MicroNugget is focused on work breakdown structures, or what project managers typically refer to as the WBS. The work breakdown structure is all of the work required to complete the project. In this MicroNugget, we'll review what a good work breakdown structure is and a couple of techniques you can follow to build good work breakdown structures. So work breakdown structures, as already mentioned, identifies all of the work required to complete the project. And I'm going to add a couple of bits into it. It's going to identify all of the work and only the work. And that's a key value of the WBS. In project planning, we sit down and we identify all of the work that's required to complete the project, all of the work that's required to satisfy the scope definition of the project charter and the project management plan. And once we have all of that work identified, we ensure that our team members work only on the WBS elements. We don't allow the team members to add new work packages because these new work packages are typically not related to completing the project scope for their project. So, how do we identify all of the work? Well, there's typically two methods we apply to identifying all of the work. I work most commonly in a top-down approach, but that's not to say it's the only way to do it or the best way to do it, because other project managers will often work in a bottom-up approach. Top-down says you start at the scope, I need to do X, and you identify the subcomponents to that. And then you identify the subcomponents to that, and the subcomponents to that, and you decompose the scope of the project down to the WBS. Or you start with a bottom-up. Your organization has experience building homes. You know, in order to build a home, you need to do tasks 1 through 256. So your standards for your organization have already identified all of the tasks for doing the home. So in a bottom-up approach, you simply say task 1, yes, task 2, yes, task 3, not appropriate, task 4, and you select the appropriate tasks for your bottom-up approach. Typically, whether you go top-down or bottom-up, you're focused on a deliverable approach where each of the deliverables satisfies the scope or the requirements. And the focus is we want to do no work that doesn't directly support satisfying the requirements for our project. So following on that deliverable-based approach, and in this case I'm going to use a top-down approach, the first thing we do is we identify all of the deliverables that the project needs. So our first deliverable we identify, we need a requirements document. And then we say, okay, within the requirements document, what do we need? Well, we need to understand what the current situation is, what is in place today and working, and what's not being satisfied today. So we're beginning to do our decomposition. And then you say, okay, in order to understand the current situation, I need to identify the carry forward features. Okay, and then what do I need to do? Well, then I need to conduct interviews. I need to review the existing documentation. I need to consolidate the requirements. And is that everything we need to do is identify all of the work packages? Or maybe we need to interview the senior VP, and we need to interview the director, and we need to interview the managers, and we need to interview the worker bees, and so on. Each project is going to decompose the WBS to a different level depending on the nature and style of the project. But with a deliverable-based top-down, we identify all of their requirements, and then we decompose the requirements into the individual work packages. Or again, if your organization has the detailed bottom-up approach, we know everything that's required to build a house, and we go through and select them. But simply selecting and saying not appropriate is going to result in a very disorganized, very unmanageable work breakdown structure. So in a bottom-up approach, we typically begin to do some grouping. So then we say, okay, major project deliverable group 1 and 2 will include tasks 1, 3, 8, and 9, and our group 2 is going to be 2, 4, 8, 15, and 23. And maybe this first level of grouping is all that we need to bring order and structure to our WBS. But often, again, we're going to have to do multiple layers of grouping. So then maybe we need to do major groups. So the major group 1 is going to consist of group number 1 and group number 4 and group number 15. And major group number 2 is going to contain groups The key to developing a good WBS is putting it into a structured approach that we can manage as project managers that's still going to ensure that we've identified all of the work required to satisfy the project scope. So all of that sounds really good, but how do you know when to stop? How do you know when it's time to stop decomposing if you're doing top-down? Or how do you know when it's time to stop grouping when you're doing bottom-up? And have all of your bottom activities been defined at the appropriate level of detail? Well, my suggestion to you, you stop doing your decomposition when all of your WBS elements, when the bottom level of all of your tasks are assignable to a single skill/individual. I will assign this task of conducting interviews to Fred, or I will assign this task of conducting interviews to an analyst when they're estimatable, when I know that the task will take 40 hours of effort. And I have a great deal of confidence that that estimate is appropriate and accurate. So it's going to be very granular and it's going to be measurable. When I go back to my team member and says, how are you doing? Your original estimate was 40 hours. How are you doing? They're going to say, I spent 20 and I think I need another 25. And that's the measurement. Creating a WBS decomposes the project scope into manageable work packages in a structure that we can manage, allows us to identify all of the work and only the work required to successfully deliver our project. This concludes our MicroNugget on work breakdown structures. I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing.